Dear viewers across the world, most welcome to my channel NAGA World Conflict Zone. Israel is the apartheid country. In a well-documented report published last month, Human Rights Watch asserts that the Israeli government is enforcing a system policy to maintain the domination by Jewish Israelis over Palestinians. The nearly 7 million Palestinians in the occupied territories and within Israel itself face collective persecutions under an apartheid system, pointing to Israeli laws that enshrines extra political right for Jews over Arab living in the same areas. Human Rights Watch concludes that Israel government is privileging Jewish Israeli who is repressing Palestinians most severely in the occupied territory. While several hundred thousand Israeli settlers live in the occupied territories as full Israeli citizens. The report notes 2.7 million Palestinians are concentrated in dense populated centers under military rule. Even more ominous are Israel's emerging populations control measures. The authorities have adopted policies to mitigate what they have openly described as a demographic threat from Palestinians, the report avers. In Jerusalem, for example, the government's plan for municipality sets the goal of maintaining a solid Jewish majority in the city and even specifies the demographic ratio it hopes to maintain. The report's central point is that after decades of human rights wars and others warning that Israel's controls of Palestine's life might lead to apartheid, the threshold has now been crossed. Indeed, one of the more startling findings in the report is that even the Palestinians living in Israel are subjected to a form of apartheid rule. Apartheid and collective persecutions are both crimes against humanity under the 1998 Rome Statutes. There, apartheid is defined as an institutionalized regime of systematic oppressions and dominations by one racial group over any other, while persecutions describes the intentional and severe deprivation of the fundamental rights of a group of people. Human Rights Watch is the first major international rights body to level such allegations, and its reports will have serious implications for Israel and its key Western backers, particularly the United States. After the collapse of South Africa's apartheid regime 3 decades ago, the world must not tolerate another, and particularly not one located at the heart of volatile region where it will serve as a catalyst for extremism and conflict. In this context, Western inactions would undermine peace as well as Israel's own long-term security. Given the special US-Israel relationships, it will be incumbent on President Joe Biden's administrations to remind Israeli officials of just how grave the accusations of apartheid is. The longer the charge sticks, the greater threat it will pose the perceptions of the Israel's legitimacy. Far from acting on a long-standing anti-Israeli agenda, as Israel's foreign minister claims. Human rights was is echoing similar findings by Israeli human rights organizations. BTSLM, for example, released a report in January whose title declared, "This is apartheid." It based that conclusion on more than 30 years of reporting by human rights groups documenting abuses in the occupied territories and within Israel. Human rights was damning reports also indirectly implicates US and Western leaders who have been complicit in Israel's illegal actions and persecutions of the Palestinian peoples, having repeatedly affirmed that human rights are a pillar of its foreign policy. The Biden administration now faces an important early test of its commitment to these norms. Unlike its predecessors, Donald Trump, the Biden administration cannot bury its head in the sand and give Israel another free pass. Failure to act would call into questions all of Biden's recent criticisms of Turkey, Russia, China and other for human rights and rule of law violations. It would reinforce of a widespread belief among Arabs and Muslims that the US and Europe practice a double standard in the Middle East, rewarding friends and punishing foes. If Biden ignores Israel's systemic discrimination against Palestinians, the US will be open to accusations of hypocrisy and cynicism. Equally important, Biden has committed his administrations to eradicating systems racism at home, a daunting and worthy challenges. Americans of all colors, including many African Americans and Americans Jews, already see a direct connections between promoting human rights abroad and upholding them at home. Moreover, if Biden and other Western leaders turned a blind eye to state sanctions, systematic discriminations, they risk encouraging the Israelis' rise to commit even more abuses. From the annexations of the Palestinian land to the expulsions of Palestinians from their homes. The Human Rights Watch report is a clarion calls for Israel's patrons to wake up to the dangers they have encouraged. Biden must not cede the moral high ground that he currently occupies relative to his predecessor. Donald Trump did Israel no favors by giving Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu everything he wanted. By empowering the most anti-democratic and xenophobic forces in Israeli society, the Trump administration brought Israel to its current crossroads. The world is watching to see if America and the West will find Israeli apartheid as a repugnant as they found South Africa apartheid. If they do, their support for Israel will have to be contingent on Israel's respect for Palestinians' dignity and humanity. Biden's current prestige gives him leverage, but the time to use it is now. The US must pressure Israel to end its apartheid policies and its occupations of the Palestinian land. A change in US policy is a crucial first step toward creating a Palestinian state that can live in peace alongside its Israeli neighbor. So, in future, what will be if apartheid country Israel is committing always as like before? So, world is watching. Who is blamed to create problem in Middle East?